Today I'd like to preach to you about our epistle reading today from St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, the end of chapter 11 going into chapter 12. I find this to be one of the most important epistles in the whole lectionary in terms of its practical everyday use and application. The context of it, starting in chapter 11, was that St. Paul was establishing his credentials as an apostle. He was saying, I have no doubt that I am no less or more than any of the apostles, than the most eminent apostles, he says. I'm equal to them. Here, let me tell you why. So he's establishing for himself some pretty bold statements. But he doesn't want to boast, and so he explains, I cannot boast. I'm just telling you how it is. But if I would to boast, I would boast in my infirmities. And so he decides to make this very important approach to his leadership. That is, he's going to lead from weakness. In today's world, we don't always appreciate what this means or how this happens. And leading from weakness is not the same thing as weak leadership. It's an important thing for us to realize. What does it mean to lead from weakness? Well, the first thing is that St. Paul puts boasting in terms of the self-promoting and self-protecting type of dialogue or monologue in his case. He puts them aside and instead rather focuses on the ways in which God has helped him and God has strengthened him instead of his own abilities. He knows that if we place our own strength, if we place all of our hope and our strength on our own merits, we'll always come up short. Even Paul. Think about Paul, if you know his story, all the things that he did. He is what we would call today a type A achiever. He goes full tilt wherever he goes. He is not one for shortcuts, not one for half measures. He's always fully immersed in what he does and fully present and very, very energetic. He's gone far above the call of duty of even some of the other apostles, as he points out elsewhere. But in the end, this makes him realize that it is not upon his own strength, though, that he has had to rely. After all that he has been through, he realizes it's not by his own power that he's been able to accomplish this. And so the true call of the Christian leader is not to try to present oneself to others as someone who has achieved some type of earthly perfection, someone who is faultless, someone who has it all together. But that the true Christian leader is one who recognizes, accepts, and admits their own flaws, their own weaknesses, their own imperfections, and they're self-aware enough to know that their only hope for accomplishment in the end will be Jesus Christ, not themselves. He explains, lest anyone should think of me above what he sees me to be or hears from me, and lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. We should point out a couple of things here. First, his basis for self-assessment is not a false humility or some kind of maudlin self-denigration or self-hatred. And there's a lot of times where we're kind of led to believe that to be humble means to really be excessively negative about ourselves, to really just denigrate ourselves. But for St. Paul, it's actually an honest desire for an objective measure, one that can be truly measured. So he says, lest I be exalted above measure. That implies that there is at some point measurable that he can be exalted in good faith, in good honesty. There is an objective measure by which any of us and all of us can, and in fact should, be praised. We live in a society right now that seems to be very caught up in self-esteem. Anything that threatens a person's self-esteem is taken as, the sin. The only sin today that is acknowledged by many people is anything that makes you feel bad about yourself. Right? Well, that's an extreme in one direction, but the other extreme is just as bad. And that's saying you should never see anything good in yourself. Thinking too poorly of ourselves is not a virtue, brothers and sisters. It leads us to, in fact, deny God, because it denies His goodness in making us. It denies His goodness in giving gifts to us to reveal His goodness. It denies His goodness in how He's continually acting in our lives. Thinking with such a low self-esteem, in a dishonest lowness, if you will, can be just as damaging as too puffed up with self-esteem. It can become a justification for spiritual indolence. Indolence is not a word we use too often, but it's a very good description of what we find in the world today. You know what indolence is? I like the image of a swamp. It's kind of like your soul is in a state of just swampy, lazy, icky, nothing, no water is moving. It's just kind of congealing and it's nasty. Indolence of the soul is that if you have swamp soul, okay? You know, swamp feet are if you were in the military, I guess. You can have swamp soul. It could be a justification for us to refuse to strive for virtue because we say, well, I'll never get there, I'm not good enough, I'm really a bad person, why should I even bother to try? So St. Paul is saying, don't go that direction, don't go the other direction either. Find what is actually appropriate to the measure. So how is the measurement taken? The first measurement that can be taken is the measurement from others. It is the external measurement. St. Paul says, lest anyone should think of me above what he sees me to be or hears me to be, what others see and hear about me. That is to say, we should first limit ourselves to the actual evidence. What we have been seen to do, what we have been heard to do. Now, there is a very natural cognitive tendency, by the way, for people to kind of idolize others, especially those in positions of authority, those in positions especially of religious authority. You see the robes, you see the black robes, you see the vestments, and you assume that you're seeing somebody who's somehow different. It's a very kind of natural cognitive thing. It's not just a superstitious thing, it's just a natural way. When we see somebody in uniform, we treat them differently than we would treat somebody who's just in shorts or whatever, or pajamas. If you saw me in my pajamas, you would not respect me half as much as you probably do, if you do at all, in my case. But we have to really be careful with this, because the fact is that when I go to bed, I'm not wearing my cassock. I'm not wearing my vestments. I'm wearing my Steelers pants. I'm just a fat kid from Detroit. Okay, I'm nobody special. And we need to think that also have that awareness about ourselves. First, we should remain sober in our own assessments of others, especially when what we hear about them is given secondhand, right? Oh, you should see so-and-so. You should listen to so-and-so. You should meet so-and-so. They're so amazing. They're so wonderful. And you meet them and they're just, some regular person, and you're like, I don't get it. That's probably a good thing, not to get sucked in. We've been getting, all of us Orthodox clergy that I know of have been contacted recently by a group of people representing some very bizarre organization, I'll call it, religious organization, some order of some temple or something. And they are very pleased to tell us that Jesus has returned. But his name is not Jesus. It's Raymond Elwood, also known as Lord Ray L. And I said, no, thank you. I'm not interested. And I got a nasty email saying, you have offended the Lord. Okay, sorry. I'll live with that. Likewise, we should refrain from judging others that we have not met, I'm sure. Lord Rael is a fine person. And we should not assume that our own good or bad reputation is also preceding us. So, real humility is real self-awareness and not either too inflated or too deflated. The second level of measurement, and perhaps the more important one, of course, is the internal spiritual measurement, which we can only come by through a rigorous self-honesty. Something that we actually probably cannot achieve by ourselves, but we need that perspective of others. Say, am I crazy? Am I thinking straight about myself here? Are my feelings logical, rational, or am I just way off? We need that self-examination, but we need to test the self-examination with the help of others. It begins with an acknowledgement of our own limitations and failings, our defects of characters, but it can get very, very deep. And hopefully it will for us as Christians. St. Viaticus of Photiki, who we're reading in our Philokalia book study, had a wonderful image this last Friday when we read him. He said the person who has sobriety, spiritual sobriety, is like a fisherman on calm waters. And when a fisherman is on the calm water, you can look into the water and see what's swimming all the way down in the deep water. But as soon as the wind and the waves kick up, what happens to the water? You can't see more than a foot. It becomes opaque. And so the sober man is the one who has the calm water, and the passionate man is the one who has the winds and the waves overcoming them. They can't see into themselves.
No.
All they see is the turmoil. They can't go any deeper. St. Paul attained that type of necessary sobriety and serenity to develop his self-awareness. But it did not come just automatically, like, well, he's St. Paul, so he just got it. He struggled to get there, just like any of us would. He explains, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. His serenity, or what serenity he might have had, was at first quite disturbed. He had this thorn in the flesh. He had a messenger of Satan to buffet him. His peace was limited. You know what it means to be buffeted? It's like the waves buffeting. Okay? It means beating upon you. Buffet sounds a little soft, right? But actually it means getting hammered. He was getting beaten. And he describes it in the end as a gift. Now it's a gift to us that St. Paul never explains what that was. He never says, and this is what the thorn in the flesh was. Or this is what the messenger said to me. Or this is what I struggled with. He leaves it completely undescribed. And thank God for that. Because if he had, then most of us could then say, well, St. Paul's problem was that, and my problem is this. So it doesn't really apply. Or he wouldn't really understand what I'm going through because my problem is so different. Or it's so much worse. Or it's not like that at all. Okay? By leaving it undefined, any of us now can listen to these words and see ourselves in them. We can see our own personal afflictions in them. Either our thorn is something very visible, very tangible, like a physical ailment, or if it's something maybe a little more hidden or invisible, like a spiritual affliction or a mental illness, or just heartbreak, whatever it is. So all I need now to be able to relate to St. Paul is this. I have to ask myself, do I know what it means to have a problem that's kicking my butt? If you have ever had a problem that was kicking your butt, you can now relate. That's all it is. You've had a messenger of Satan to buffet you. That's my messenger of Satan, whatever it is. The problem or problems that overwhelm them. So St. Paul says, concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he's no different than us. How many of us, our first reaction is, and by the way, should be, to say, whoa, Lord, help me out. Take this from me. I don't want this in my life. Take this from me. Make it depart from me. Make it go away. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to experience this limitation to my life, to my freedom. I don't want anyone to know what I'm going through. I don't want to suffer. And I don't want people to know that I'm suffering from the things that I suffer from. I want to be able to put my best foot forward. I want to be able to overcome my problems. I want to be able to not be a burden to others. I don't want to disappoint anybody, to show anybody or reveal how imperfect I really am. Please, Lord, take it from me. Make it go away. Now, as has been wisely said by many others before, God has 3 answers to these kind of requests. Yes, no, and not yet, right? And sometimes, by the way, yes is not necessarily the best answer. Sometimes it's incredible. It's an incredible yes. We heard today about this miracle of the widow's son. The widow of Nain burying her only son. It means she's going to be completely lost on her own. No one to take care of her. And Christ comes in and raises the son from the dead. And that's awesome, and that's wonderful. But I can't help but imagine how many people since then have read that passage, mothers who have lost children, fathers who have lost children, and said, that's great for her, but what about me? What about my child? So every yes has a price, because somebody else is going to get a no. And in the case of resurrection or reanimation, that's very, very rare, right? There are some who will have a blessing, but most of us will not. For St. Paul, the answer that was given to him was clearly no. Not even not yet. No. There was something of value in the struggle that he was undergoing from this thorn that in the end was going to help him grow. It was a weakness that was going to help him be able to grow stronger. Because he would have to learn not to rely anymore on his own strength, but on the strength of Jesus Christ, whom he was preaching. It's one thing to preach Jesus Christ, it's another to rely on him. I know, because it's easy to preach Christ. You think this is hard when I'm doing it. It's far harder to rely for everything on Jesus Christ. It's easy to talk about, much harder to walk. And so God said to him, implied, no. He said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. My grace, my gift is enough. My strength is made perfect in weakness, in your weakness, he says to St. Paul. And so it is for St. Paul then, the acceptance of that weakness, of his own limitation, of his own inability to overcome his problem that's kicking him, that makes room for God's strength and perfection to finally come to bloom, to come to flourish. And the paradox of spiritual life is just this, that only when we admit defeat do we begin to attain victory. Only when we surrender our will and the care of our lives to our good and loving God do we begin to experience his power, his strength, and his victory. We are swallowed up in victory. Just like death is swallowed up in God's victory, we're swallowed up in victory, but we're swallowed up in his love. And we feel that, and we experience that. We begin to find peace and serenity in the acceptance of the things we cannot change by leaving them to God. We don't ask Him to take them away from us. We don't even necessarily ask Him to change them or make them better. We just say, I entrust them to you. I rely on you for me to deal with them, however I am supposed to deal with them. We were talking in our Philocali book study about the Jesus prayer. The Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And it's so easy to be tempted to pray even the Jesus prayer in the hopes that if I pray this prayer, God will do something for me. Yeah, He's going to. He's going to have mercy on you. Let Him determine what that looks like. Don't try to tell God how to do His job. He will show mercy in the way that's beneficial to you the most. Seeing His goodness, experiencing His mercy, we are then emboldened, encouraged to change the things that we can. And we do begin to see things changing for the better. Because we're no longer living with this frantic and unrealistic perfectionism that so easily clouds our minds and drives us like a slave driver. Experiencing and witnessing the powerful grace of God to bring peace and positive change in our lives, we then grow in wisdom. Not only to know the difference, but also to help others with their problems, with their struggles. Not by trying to change them, by simply seeing in them where they need to accept and where they can make a difference. So all of these things St. Paul understands then, and he can say without hesitation, therefore, most gladly, not just somewhat gladly, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me or dwell within me. Both ways you could translate that from the Greek. I will boast in my infirmities. I am glad for my weaknesses, not upset with them, not regretting them, not ashamed of them, not resenting them, but rejoicing in my weaknesses, in my illnesses, in my problems, in my disappointments, in my brokenheartedness, in my broken bodiness, in my broken soul and mind. I will rejoice in that, because in that and through that, the power of Christ can come and dwell within me. In fact, he says in the following verse, which wasn't in our reading today, but continues the thought. He says, therefore, I take pleasure. Who of us can say this? I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in insults, in needs, in persecutions, in distress, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Brothers and sisters, this is our invitation. This is our hope. Embrace your weakness. Lead from weakness. Accept your limitations and your infirmities in the love of God. And let Him unfold then His mercy in your life. Let Him change what needs to be changed, strengthen what needs to be strengthened, heal what needs to be healed, and reveal what needs to be revealed. Our part is so easy, and it's so simple, and it's so small. It can be summed up in the words of one wise person. Acceptance is the answer to all of my problems today. Through the prayers of the Holy Apostle Paul, Lord,